Hello, this is Craig, and welcome to another episode of Cruising Off Duty. In the last episode, we covered the pros and cons of the anchorage Crystal Bay. In this episode, we're going to go over the pros and cons of the next anchorage, Aylmer Island. We tend to skip this island and just sail on by most of the time, but as you can see from these episodes in the past, every time we go by Aylmer Island, there are a ton of boats at anchor there. Now, it's a fine anchorage if you're just stopping for the day to have a barbecue, but I'll tell you why I don't believe it's a good anchorage if you're trying to stay the night. And of course, it wouldn't be a Cruising Off Duty episode if I didn't show you the aerial perspective from my drone. So all that is coming up in this episode, Episode 9, Sailing the Ottawa River, the pros and cons of Aylmer Island. Alright, we're passing Aylmer Island. By the way, the episode is going to be about Aylmer Island. It is probably our least favorite anchorage. Seems like people go there mostly because there is just a spit of land in the middle of the river and it gives them a waypoint to go to, anchor, barbecue, then go home. But it's really not a great anchorage for sleeping, or pretty much doesn't have great holding either, and there's no protection from the wind, so not our favorite, but nonetheless needs to be covered. Okay, this episode we're going to talk about Aylmer Island. Well, as we said last episode, our club is down here, and the first anchorage we talked about, which is closest to the club, is Crystal Bay, which is right there. So the next closest anchorage is Aylmer Island, which is right there. So let's zoom in on that. And you're going to see Aylmer Island's not one of my favorite anchorages. But what it does have going for it is it's a landmark that people can aim for. And you can anchor right in here. The reason they aim for it is most of the people who are at the Nepean Sailing Club or the Britannia Club or the Aylmer Club, Nepean is here, Britannia is here, and Aylmer is there. So most of the people just tend to day sail and they stay within Lac du Chêne. And the one thing they do, especially if they're coming from Nepean or Britannia, it's a fairly good amount of sailing to go back and forth across here if the wind's coming from the northwest, which it generally tends to do. So by the time you sail up to Aylmer Island, you've had a pretty good day of sailing, and a lot of people stop there for a break or for a barbecue or just to anchor and socialize. So it becomes a very popular anchorage. But for things I'll go into in this episode, it's actually not that great of an anchorage. I'm going to have drone video to show you what it looks like from the air, but just from Navionics you can see here, there's really only one spot to anchor, and that's right in here. There's a green buoy here. So you come around the green buoy, you come in here, and you anchor in here. Unfortunately, it either goes from extremely shallow, 2 feet, 5 feet, 1 foot, and all of this and this is rock. So you're completely surrounded by rock. And then in the middle, it's actually quite deep. It's 15 to 20, 18 feet. And in here, it's over 20 feet deep. So what ends up happening is you're either so close to the island trying to anchor that you're too shallow, or you're right in the middle where it's borderline too deep. I mean, if you want to put a 5-to-1 scope out, and you're in 20 to 30 feet of water, you're out there with 100, 150 feet of road. And the problem is it's a very popular anchorage during the day. So there's a lot of boats packed into a very small space. And the water's a little bit too deep for everybody to be that close together. So what most people tend to do is just drop anchor. They have way too little scope and they just spend the day. But I have gone by there a few times and seen boats anchoring there at night. And I personally wouldn't do it because being that it's a rock bottom, it doesn't have the greatest holding. And realistically, this little tiny island doesn't really give you a lot of protection from the wind. Unless you just coincidentally happen to be here and the wind is directly on the other side of this little island, you're going to be completely exposed the entire night while you're sleeping. And I personally wouldn't sleep very well knowing that my anchor is sitting on a rocky bottom with complete rock shelves surrounding you. So this episode is going to go over the pros and cons, but just a little hint here. I wouldn't consider this a good anchorage to sleep overnight. Okay, recently in July, my buddy Vince and I decided to go out to Aylmer Island, mostly for the reason of getting some drone video. It was a perfect day to be anchored at Aylmer Island as it was calm with very low winds. As you can see here, we're anchored perfectly in the trough in line with those other two boats. We're all right where we should be. But when you show the drone video, you're going to realize there's some other people also anchored there that are probably a little bit too close to that rock shelf I showed you earlier. Also keep in mind that this is a weekday, so there's not nearly as many boats as there would be on a weekend. As you can see when I first take off, it's kind of a gravelly beach. It's not the softest sand that you would like. If you're looking for soft sand and you have a boat, take a longer trip up to Constance Bay. The sand there is much, much better. All right, there is my baby off duty. And the boat directly to the left of the screen is also in line with the proper spot to anchor. But just check out this boat back here. He is dangerously close to the rocks and the green buoy, so I'm hoping he's just stopping temporarily to go swimming. But I did see in the past Tanzer 22 anchor out that way one time, and they went swimming, and while they were swimming, the boat started dragging into the rocks, and they ended up having to call a powerboat over to pull them off, which I'm sure did wonders for their lead keel. And lead keels are not indestructible. At Haul Out one year, I saw a lead keel that looked like a hockey stick all bent, and I asked the guy what happened, and he said the only thing that happened all summer was that he tried to go to the left of Aylmer Island and got caught between two rocks with his keel. He couldn't get himself off, so he asked a powerboater to pull him off. And in the process of pulling him off, he bent his keel. So this area over here to the left of the island is pretty much a no-go zone. Even if your Navionics software says you probably can make it through, I wouldn't risk it. It's like a minefield of rocks. One final story to ram home the point that you don't want to go to the left of the island. The guy that used to share the slip beside me went out and tried to go around the left side of the island and ended up bending his rudder on a rock. The rudder then would only turn to the right and not to the left, so he had to do circles all the way back to the club before getting a powerboater to tow him in the rest of the way. It cost a lot of money to lift the boat out and put a new rudder on. Because of all the hazards of rocks around here, I generally just avoid this anchorage altogether. But a couple of times I have anchored here, and both times I sort of regretted it. The one and only time I ever anchored there and stayed overnight was in my very first season when I was a little bit naive, let's say. We got a bit of a late start leaving the club, and the sun was starting to set, and we knew we probably weren't going to make it all the way to Pinnies unless we motored. And then I decided, why not just anchor at Aylmer Island? Seems like other people do it. So we throw anchor about where I am right now, and we go to bed, and it seems good. Until the wind started picking up about 1 in the morning. Remember, this island is pretty small, so you really have absolutely no protection from the wind. Anyways, when I realized how windy it was getting, and I realized there was nothing but rock shelf around me, I spent the rest of the night getting up and checking my anchor, hour after hour. I vowed after that to never sleep on my boat at Aylmer ever again. I would rather motor the rest of the distance in the dark and anchor at Pinnies Point. The other time we anchored there, I was with my father-in-law. We decided to stop there temporarily and go for a kayak up towards Pinnies and back. Just as I get 3/4 of the way to Pinnies, the wind starts whipping up. And I think, oh my God, my boat. I was paddling back like I was in the Olympic trials because all I could think of was that my boat was probably dragging into the rocks and I wasn't there to protect it. As you can see, I pointed out, although some of the beach has sand, a lot of the beach is just stony gravel. Not the greatest to walk on. Well, there's Vince and I. We shot the drone from the shore, not the boat this time. And let's go over the pros and cons of Aylmer Island. Well, the first pro is, it is a destination. So when your coworkers ask where you went on the weekend with your boat, you can say you went to Aylmer Island. I guess that's something. The second pro is that there is a beach. It's not a great beach, but it is a beach. And young kids won't know the difference anyway. As you can probably clearly tell, I'm not a huge fan of this anchorage. So let's go over the numerous cons. First, there's no protection from the wind. You're only behind a teeny tiny island, so the wind comes from almost any direction, you're going to be in chop. Second con is the holding is bad. It's mostly rocky bottom, and you need a lot of scope in order to feel safe, and you just don't have the space. The third con is the one I find most alarming, and the reason I won't sleep there is that you are surrounded by rock. There are other anchorages like Crystal Bay, where if you start to drag a little overnight, it's not a big deal. You've got football fields of space in order to drag. Here, if you drag even a little bit, you're probably going to wake up to that awful crunching sound of your keel banging against rocks. And the fourth con, although I'm sure I could come up with more, but I don't want to beat a dead horse here, is there's no amenities. In other words, there's nothing to do on this island. It's fine for kids, but an adult, you will walk across it in less than 2 minutes and then wonder, what else am I going to do today? So as you can see, as soon as we were done doing the drone video, Vince and I just took off for Aylmer Island. As I said, there's not much to do on that island, and what are two grown men gonna do, frolic around on a gravelly beach? I don't think so. So that's it for episode 9. Episode 10 is gonna be more of a vlog of Janice and I going up to Constance Bay for the weekend. Episode 11 will probably be when I cover the next anchorage, and a much better anchorage than this one, Pinney's Point. So you can look forward to me having a lot more pros and a lot less cons on that anchorage. Until then, if you like this video, please click like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Thanks a lot. And here's some videos from the recent past if this is the first time you've seen this channel.